Welcome, welcome, welcome to the March 12th meeting of the North Texas Archaeological Society. I'm happy to see everybody who's joined us here in the room and online. It's a lot of excitement in the room here, folks, so just bear with us. We've got a great program tonight. And per usual, we're going to start covering our typical business items before we get to our lovely speaker for this evening. Will this thing go away? There it goes. Okay. All right. Everybody's settled in. All right. Welcome, members. Welcome, visitors. We're happy to see you tonight. So to get to our March business, a lot of stuff coming up this year. So thank you to our new and renewing members for getting in there kind of at the last second. Our yearly membership soft deadline for March. Some people squeaked in at the last second. We're doing pretty good for March. So we're at 223 members right now. So thank you all for being on the ball. And then I just want to remind our students in the audience and the people who are friends with students who might be interested in being part of the North Texas Archaeological Society. We do subsidize memberships for students, and that comes with a whole suite of goodies. All right, first point of business, we're going to dive into our volunteer opportunities. Coming up, something we're familiar with, we participated in last year. The Cattle Ranchers Convention takes place here in downtown Fort Worth, and a few of us did some outreach to basically landowners to help educate them and discuss potential cultural resources on their land, talk about easements and the such. So it's a really a cool way of connecting to people who might have archaeological sites on their land, because such a large portion of cultural sites, pre-contact historic, are all on private land in Texas. And a lot of the time, these landowners don't really know what they can do with it, if anything. Maybe they're a little hesitant to let somebody record it or talk about it. And so we're a really good resource for that, just kind of starting those conversations. So Cattle Raisers Convention is a cool thing to volunteer for, especially if you've got a lot of knowledge about Texas. And it only takes a little bit of knowledge of archaeology. So if you want to get involved in that convention, reach out to Kelton, who's our TAS district person, and let her know you want to come. It's 2 days, so you can kind of pick what time period you want to go. On the same vein, we got invited to the Fort Worth Nature Center and Refuge for their annual NatureCon. And so there's going to be a lot of biological focused topics, but a lot of that folds into cultural resources and cultural heritage. So it's really important that archaeology is represented at this event. So it's a family event. It's primarily educational, but it's also a lot of fun. So think of it as like kind of a field day for families, but a little bit of science, a little bit of education. So we're just looking for people to be at the table with NTAS, handing out flyers, talking about archaeology. It's really a relaxing setting, and it's a beautiful place. If you want to see a little slice of what Fort Worth used to be, I highly recommend going to that. So reach out to Jimmy for that. That's coming up pretty quick. Okay, so word on the street is even though some of the academies closed, there might still be a spot open for rock art. So word on the street is it's one spot. It might have been two recently, but first come, first serve when it comes to that. So if you've easily got plans, you got an open weekend, you can drive up to El Paso in the next couple weeks, absolutely take the opportunity to get in on that. Nonetheless, there might be a couple spots as well in the San Angelo 101 Academy. And so one's focused on rock art documentation. The other one is focused on really the fundamentals of archaeology and archaeological documentation. So there's a classroom component for both of them, and then a field component, which is really fun. Absolutely worth it. And we do offer scholarships, so you should tap us if you want to be sponsored for doing something like that and getting educated. We've got you covered. Some other opportunities coming up, we refer to them as training opportunities, just like the workshops for TAS. NTAS also provides opportunities to go out with a small group and learn how we actually record an archaeological site. And it's not terribly complicated, but it's a really cool exercise, kind of understanding like what you have to know about the landscape and how that resource is kind of investigated on the landscape. And then from there, you start kind of checking boxes essentially on a kind of formal system that the state puts into a database. So it's really about accurately recording the site's components, the extents of the sites, and then how we convey that into the estate database. It's kind of a big fundamental thing of archaeology. So rapidly coming up would be the March 21st one, also at the Fort Worth Nature Center and Refuge. So an easy drive from here. And it has 2 sites. So you get a chance to not only see one archaeological site, but you get to see 2 kinds, which is pretty typical. One historic age, one much older than that. So you're gonna get the best of both worlds. So I highly, highly recommend signing up for that. There's still quite a few seats. And then the following month in April, just down the road, up the West Fork Trinity River, is a site we're trying to salvage. Essentially, that's part of a cut bank. It's not unusual, but you'll gain some of the same skills, but it's just for one site. So please reach out to Jimmy if you'd like to participate. Lastly, we also have a donation campaign from our partners at Southern Methodist University. As most of you know, we've been partnering with them for a very long time now to rehabilitate and bring up to date to curation standard vast quantities of artifacts that have been collected, particularly pertaining to a TAS field school in the 70s. And part of the mission, not just bringing everything up to standard, but maybe let's get some research questions out of this. Let's like find out some more information, because all this data is just sitting there being untapped. And one of the easiest things to do is to confirm some assumptions with carbon dating. And so a big patron by the name of David Journey has already pledged $3,000 towards that effort. And so we're conveying that they want to try to match that. So if you'd like to help with that effort financially, log on to givingday.smu.edu to support some of the chronometric concerns with the rehabilitation of these collections that we've been working on quite a long time. We're pretty proud of it. All right, so just to wrap up, something to look forward to next month. Our guest, the topic is biological anthropology. So if you've got an itch for forensics, next month is going to cover that from a person who not only works on this campus, she works in this building. So Kate will be joining us next month. I'd like, in the meantime, all of you to join me in welcoming Dr. Leslie Bush, who's here to present tonight.
Right. Oh, okay. I'm going to back out and see if we can start from the beginning. Howdy. It's really great to be here with such an active and enthusiastic group of folks. You have such an amazing organization here. My task tonight is to talk about the material culture and the place held therein by plants in the Texas Panhandle during the Plains Villager period of about 1100 to 1450. Specifically, the antelope creek culture, and I'm including Buried City in that. The general outline is going to be, I'm going to talk about plains villagers in general, then more about Antelope Creek culture specifically, and then we'll blaze through the plant remains. Some of this is still work in progress, so interpretations are preliminary, and I welcome your thoughts. Oh, I do want to point out while we're here, you've got Antelope Creek, and there we go. There we go, Antelope Creek, and you'll note this Upper Republican phase is another Plains Village manifestation of the Central Plains, and notice also that the Eastern Pueblos are right there, which is vastly relevant. Plains Village cultures extend all the way up to the northern US border. You've got the Knife River Indian villages here. You see some remains of, well, they're called pit houses, but they're not underground. They're more like sunken living rooms, really. And you can see that there. But I consider this range of the Plains villagers, I like to call it the range of Yucca glauca, of soapweed yucca, which is almost the same as the range of the Plains village cultures. So I think that just as the bison is the iconic animal of the Plains villagers, that maybe soapweed yucca is the iconic plant of the Plains villagers. Oh, sure. Oh, these are from the biota. This map is from the biota of North America. Every state that has an attested herbarium record for Yucca glauca is in dark green. Every county that has an attested herbarium specimen is in light green. So some of those counties where you see every county, it's dark green, and you see every county around it is light green, I can almost guarantee you that there is soapweed yucca there, just nobody's collected it and put it into an herbarium. So you got to interpret these maps for what they are. So thank you for that question. And we're still at the Knife River Indian villages in north of Bismarck, North Dakota, which I highly recommend if you get a chance to go. It's famous for being the village that Sakakawea was living in when Lewis and Clark came through and picked up her and her husband. And you can see in the painting that these are earth lodges covered with sod or bare dirt. And the village extends far beyond the simple footprint of the houses to the river and presumably to the agricultural plots that were around it. And Plains villagers were mostly agriculturalists. A lot of what we know about Plains agriculture, and indeed agriculture in the eastern, our model for agriculture in a lot of the eastern US in general, comes from Buffalo Bird Woman's Garden, a book, the title of a book to which authorship is given to Mr. Wilson, but it was really Buffalo Bird Woman herself sharing the knowledge that she learned as a child about farming on the Northern Plains. And you see her here in it. Again, it's called a garden, but boy, is that a lot of land. And she is hoeing the garden with a bison scapula hoe. You can see on the left a bison scapula hoe reproduction that's in the museum there in the Knife River villages. Doug Boyd has proposed on lots of lines of evidence that at least in the Texas Panhandle, these bison scapula hoes were not primarily, or maybe not at all, agricultural implements. They were more likely used for mixing daub to be as part of the architecture of the houses. Bison tibia digging sticks with these sharpened beveled edges that are much more much tougher than the edge of a bison scapula are the most likely cultivation tools. And on the right, you see a reproduction of a storage pit that Buffalo Bird Woman shared. She actually dug a replica into the bank of the river and created one for Mr. Wilson. And it's classic, the classic bell-shaped pit that archaeologists find so often, because when they're no longer suitable for storing crops, they're filled with trash, and that's much more typically how we find them. One thing to note about this, there's so much to talk about that particular pit, but note that the top it is covered, it's sealed and then covered with earth, giving it some camouflage so that you can leave your village, for instance, to go on a bison hunt. And it makes it more difficult for people to find where you have cached your food unless they were there when you buried it and they're your friends and they already know. And again, this is a time when bison roamed the plains in large numbers, and people were bison hunters. There's some beautiful, beautiful examples in ledger art, as you see on the right. But that's of mounted bison hunting, and of course these are pedestrian bison hunters taking down bison on foot, which does change the game. It means the game is a little bit different from what we know ethnographically, especially from 18th and 19th century mounted bison hunters. But from what we know, people on the Great Plains in general had summer hunts and winter hunts. Winter hunts were usually conducted on the central, at least on the central and northern plains, from their winter villages, which were in sheltered valleys, sometimes in teepees, where you're sheltered from the wind in the winter, and you have a lot of access to fuel wood. They're in those in the riparian environments where the trees are growing. Bison are also sheltering in these types of environments over the winter. Summer hunts, some tribes did summer hunts are done after the last weeding of the crops is done. You've got your crops in and the plants are starting to grow enough that they're starting to shade over the soil. And so they're going to be able to keep the weeds down by themselves for a while. So you do your last weeding and then you go out on the hunt. Some tribes would hunt as a group. They would come together for a Sundance. All the villages would come together to one location, go out on a Sundance, have a Sundance, and then go out and hunt as a group. Other tribes, individual villages would hunt as a unit. And that is the Sundance Kiowa. Well, there's some debate whether this is a Kiowa Sundance, but it's certainly a Plains Sundance there on the right. And a lot of and one reason that they're hunting in the summer on the central and northern plains is because the bison are leaving Texas because it's getting too dry here and they're going north in search of better grass. So the logic of combining hunting and agriculture is a little different here on the Texas southern plains. And a lot of the literature concerns that. Can you really have it all? Are they skipping bison hunts in drought years? Are they really corn agriculturalists? I think that's all I'll say there. One way that bison hunting and agriculture articulate is through the use of animal parts becoming agricultural tools. You see deer on the left, those deer jawbones used to, presumably to cut grass. You can see the silica polish on that lower jaw. And then those are bison tibia, those are the blades of the bison tibia digging implements and on the right. And so in terms of negotiating how and when you plant, where you're going to put your crops. Because I guess I'll start out, I'm going to go back to the northern plains. If you're in the Knife River villages, you've got 120 frost-free days, and that's barely enough to grow corn. So as soon as the ice breaks up on the Missouri River and flows downstream, you get in there, you salvage the bison carcasses, and you salvage as much driftwood as you can, and then you get to your fields and you plant, because you got to get in there with your 120 days. On the southern plains, it's the temperature or the dryness, the water is really the limiting factor. You've got 200 frost-free days. You've got a lot to play with. So your job is making sure that you plant where the water is going to be. And there are several ways to get that done. Oh, and here's the article by Doug that, the 2008 article that talks about the bison hose and also proposes what we have come to call akchin planting, from the O'odham word that means mouth of the wash, from in the Southwest and in the desert Southwest, where you'll plant your seeds at the mouth of the wash where water washes down the canyon walls or down the arroyo, and you'll get a fairly good wet chunk of soil that's going to stay wet for a while because so much water is coming down the wash. And that kind of planting can really make a difference. And a version of this that's been proposed for Chaco Canyon, which is what you have on the right, is you'll notice that the villages, the great houses are mostly on the northeastern side of Chaco Canyon. So the southwestern side of Chaco Canyon that faces northeast, and therefore has a little less, it's a little cooler and it's a little moister, that's more free for planting. And you have the canyon wall behind those plantings that you could use check dams or other fairly minor engineering to direct the runoff coming down that canyon wall to where your crops, to wherever you have planted your crops, or to the mouth, again, to the mouth of the wash, should you so choose. So there's a lot of ways that people in the Panhandle could have used fairly low intensity interventions to make a really big difference in this very dry environment. I'm not aware of a lot of much archaeological evidence for any except the check dams, but it is worth thinking about as we consider how to combine hunting and farming. Yes. Antelope Creek architecture has, returning to the material culture of Antelope Creek people, architecture is very diverse. A lot of the early work focused on the stone slabs that line or were foundations for the houses, usually square, but you can see on the right, there's what sure looks like a full-blown pueblo out there at Alabates. And so the southwestern influence is obvious. You also see in the blue, two houses probably temporarily separate. One has stone foundations and then round activity areas, these sort of ancillary rooms associated with that structure. The structure on the left is from a different time period, and it has no stones at all. Picket post basin house, it has a channel down the middle with benches on either side. And an entryway facing east, which you can see the eastern entryway, I think, on almost all of these. So the architecture, kind of plains, but kind of southwestern, and it varies over the territory of the Panhandle. Reconstructions have varied just as much of what these structures look like above ground. The one I want to draw your attention to is, I believe this is Ryan Wilkins' reconstruction of the houses from M Cross Ranch that I'll talk about in a bit, and that is entirely an earthen structure with daub and grass is also incorporated. Ceramics, ceramics, as you can probably imagine by now, a mix of very visible, decorated southwestern wares, but the basic pottery of the people are these Borger cord-marked jars with vertical rims. And again, fairly local Alabates church. You got a preform in there as well as the Washita points, and then the highly visible, charismatic turquoise and obsidian. So that's the background. We are able, finally, I think, to be able to say a little more about Antelope Creek people than they were corn agriculturalists, at least I hope. I have data from, oh, there we go. Five sites, varying amounts of data from varying contexts and various sample sizes. And as Doug Boyd has pointed out, as he's pointed out in Porch Talk, a book that you should definitely get. There's a Texas primary school curriculum associated with this book on archaeology. It's Doug Boyd paired with John Erickson, and I will not, if you don't have a copy, you should. I won't be offended if you just pull out your phone right now and order one. So there you go. And in this book, there's a map almost like this where Doug points out that the places that you really want to live, and so the places you find people, are in the breaks of the Canadian River, that one that snakes all the way across the Panhandle, or in the Caprock Canyon lands where sites 2 and 3 are located. And so these are the sites my data is coming from. Site number 1, M Cross Ranch, that is John Erickson's ranch, and started with Hank's house, was half of a house. The house floor was discovered eroding in profile in a cut bank. and was excavated in 2001. Excavations are still ongoing. It is quite the project, and I'm honored to be analyzing the plant remains. Oh, and here's Mr. Erickson himself. I'm aware of 4 houses there, at least 2 of which burned. They are all named after characters in the book. So there is obviously Hank's house was the first, and there's Pete's and J.T. Cluck and Drover as well. So, and you can see, because 2 of them burned, you can see those post molds behind Mr. Erickson, and just how beautifully preserved some of this architecture is, at least below the ground. Isaac Windmill, a very different sort of excavation. Members of the Panhandle Archaeological Society noticed 9 features eroding from a cut bank in a county road in the Panhandle, and they went and dug them out. And those 9 features include this feature 1, which is a bell-shaped pit before excavation on the left, after excavation on the right. It is just a beast of a pit, and most of the data, botanical data from Isaac Windmill are from that feature. Harrison Greenbelt was the TAS field school in 1996. It's very well dated, partly through Brandon Tully's work with Texas Tech University. So you can see the 3 components up in the upper right, and the report is in production. It is already on the TAS webpage, and it will be released as TAS Special Report number 9. Jack Allen was excavated in 1969 to 1970, and this is a house that does not have the stone architecture associated with, so it's much more like the Cross Ranch sites. I looked at some corn and identified some of the structural elements, some of the architectural elements at the request of Chris Lintz. And Chris Lintz was also involved in the Landurgeon Mesa, which were excavated in the early 1980s by the Texas Historical Commission. And I have Glenna Dean's data from her master's thesis. And there is also online a very thorough summary article by Chris Lintz, and it's in these issues of La Tierra are free online, so you can find that. Oh, and Dean also had some pollen data, but preservation turned out to be poor, so I'm focusing mostly on the macrobots. So the plants, you have to start with corn, right? When you're starting with the plants. Those are corn cupules on the left, the part that holds the kernels to the cob, and then kernels on the right. There are also stalk fragments, maize stalk fragments from 2 sites, 2 of the 5 sites, and that's not something I've really seen outside Mississippian sites. I don't know if that points to the intensity of agriculture being at that level, or if there's something about how they're harvesting and processing, or maybe a taste for the sweetness of the corn stalk. But it is interesting and unusual in my experience. So, but what did it look like? As you can see, preservation of plant material here is through carbonization all over the Panhandle. Or at least the upland sites in the Panhandle. So we don't have color, we don't have a lot of shape of the kernels still adhering to the cobs, but we can say a few things from the cobs. We can count the row numbers going around the cobs. You see half of a 12-row cob from Harrison Greenbelt. There's a 10-row cob from Landurgeon Mesa. Mary Adair has characterized the corn of Plains villagers in general as being Midwestern 12-row. And just looking at the cobs on the right, which are part of the collections of the Panhandle Plains Museum, and I have not seen any more of them than this photo, but you can see that, that they have fairly straight rows going up and down, and the rows are not swirling, going from left to right, swirling around the cob. But in one case, the rows are sort of offset, so there's sort of a zigzag pattern to how the kernels are held in that cob, and that's archaeobotanists call that a tessellations. It's a tessellated cob, and that is something that that southwestern archaeologists note are the spirals and the tessellations. Eastern woodlands archaeologists not asked to record that trait, and I don't think I've seen it in the eastern woodlands, which might be why we're not asked to record it. So from a very cursory look at some panhandle corn, it does seem to me that they're very much like the other aspects of material culture, kind of fundamentally Midwestern, but there's some definite southwestern influences here. Oh, and here you see southwestern corn on the left, where you can see some tessellated cobs and also some marginal germination, marginal pollination. And in the upper left, you have one of the spiral cobs. So a lot of the corn that we're looking at are things that are probably more similar to these kinds of 10 to 12 row corns. And here's a southern dent on the far right that has a little bit of spiral to it, but that's a later corn than what we're dealing with here. Oh, and squash. We have squash both as this is not a full seed, it's the pepita, the inside of a seed, and quite a bit of squash rind, which is really interesting. It's fairly delicate and doesn't preserve, so you have to think if you're finding a little, there was a lot. And can you see the tiny white dots on the top of that? That's the exterior of the squash rind, and those are little mineral. They look like little tiny pearls. Put your pumpkin under the microscope, and they look like little pearls that are embedded in squash rinds. They're known as cystoliths. And then down on the bottom photo, you see the cross section of the squash. And I'm showing Cushaw squashes are a possibility. The earliest squashes out here were, anyway, Cushaw squashes are a possibility, one possibility for the kind of squash that we're seeing here. There was also tobacco at Isaac Windmill, that great big bell pit, just one, and that's a millimeter scale out there. So they're tiny, but it's very characteristic, and that is Nicotiana rustica on the right, being not real happy in my garden, but you can at least see that it has yellow flowers, unlike the pink flowered burley that excuse me, that is mostly grown today. Oh, the plants the tobacco, squash, and corn, those are plants that seeds were planted by the people. Corn, obviously, it doesn't grow more than a generation or two. It cannot survive without human intervention, putting those seeds into the ground. And tobacco, Nicotiana rustica, native of South America. It's the turtle on the fence post. It didn't get there by itself. And the rest of the plants I'm going to talk about, I'm still looking for a good way to frame crops. It's not really crops versus wild. That's not right. It's really a continuum of differences in the nature and the intensity of the commitment that people have to growing, to making sure that those plants grow or grow in ways that are most useful or most pleasing to humans. So I'm working on it. These are not really wild. They're being sort of cared. A lot of them are probably, some of them might be, but a lot of them are being cared for by people. Chenopodium, known as goosefoot, shows up from the Pleistocene for the historic period on the plains. It's everywhere and very much enjoyed by people. You see images of the seed on the left, and when field school in Palo Duro Canyon in 2019, we did a botanical survey, and a lot of my plant pictures are from that survey. We identified 3 different species of goosefoot, of Chenopodium out there, and it has 3 different uses, which is kind of cool. It's in the spinach family, so the leaves taste like spinach, delicious, put them in your lunches. The seed heads are a lot they're like skinny broccoli. So they're really, you can eat them like broccolini is essentially what they're like. And finally, the seeds are edible, and they are essentially American quinoa, which is a domesticate. All the forms of the Chenopodium that I'm seeing in the Panhandle are they're wild forms, but that doesn't mean people weren't tending them a bit, making sure they could grow in the ways people wanted them to. And one thing that was really interesting in the 2019 botanical survey in Palo Duro was these dry playas, where we found almost pure stands in kind of concentric rings in this one dry playa. You can see the yellow coreopsis flowers on the edge, and in that middle ring that took up most of the playa, that's Chenopodium on the right, and it's all, like I say, almost a pure stand. And in the center, toward the center, we saw some barnyard grass, which is very common on northeastern oneoticites of the northeastern plains. I haven't seen any in the Panhandle, but it's interesting. And oh, and just at the playa edge, there was an almost pure stand of little barley. And what's really interesting about this is it's a little connected to a recent theory for some origins of agriculture in the world by Spengler and Miller. This is 2019, where they propose that the people who are following large animals at the end of the Pleistocene are encountering mini ecologies like this, where they get these pure stands of plants from where the large animals have been wallowing and pooping. And so you get the kinds of things that they were eating. And so people essentially, in their scenarios, people essentially took over the role of seed dispersals that was left behind by some of the megafauna that went extinct at the end of the Pleistocene. Not what's happening here, but it is another example of the interrelationships between the people, the animals, and the plants. Wild rye, another grain, found that at three of the 5 sites actually. In the Panhandle, and it's as you can imagine, it's a close relative of the domestic European rye, and I notice it has a long history of use in the Panhandle. Mike Quigg excavations, they found wild rice starch on grinding stones from the late Archaic at the Landis site. Sunflower. All the forms that I have seen of sunflower are wild forms. It's a fairly common plant on these sites. I saw some, and Phil saw some both at Cross M. Yeah, it's interesting that they don't have the domestic form, and that's a whole lecture in itself. But and yucca, I'm putting it here as a food plant because the flowers are edible and the stalks are edible if you cook them. We have it at least 2 sites. And yeah, just gonna say that. Prickly pear, I'm a little surprised that this is the entire representation of prickly pear. No prickly pear pads, just this one seed from Harrison Greenbelt. So again, that's a little bit of a mystery because it's such a useful plant. You can even use the juice, the prickly pear juice of the pads, the mucus, the mucilage in the pads to use in adobe. So yes, so I welcome thoughts on that. Oh, Doug Boyd has collected the only, as far as I know, the only plum pit from a site in the Panhandle, and he helpfully picked up the pit, which is that carbonized one on the right, just to the right of the penny. There's a whole pit on top and a broken open one, so you can do the comparison that he helpfully provided there. However, I have seen plum wood at 2 of the sites on the Panhandle, attesting to its presence in the 14th century and to its use by people. So there are beans. Glenna Dean proposes that one of the beans that she found at Landrigan Mesa is a domestic bean. Beans are shockingly late, I think, all over. So probably 1100 or 1200 will be the earliest common beans in the region. But most of what I have seen and most of what Glenna saw are various wild beans. So some of the wild phaseolus, and what I'm seeing are probably Strophostyles leiosperma. I apologize, that is Strophostyles helvola on the right, but it looks a lot alike, and helvola is what grows in my yard, so that's the picture you have. Drop seed is fascinating. Richard Drass has proposed that it may have been an incipient domesticate. The seeds, as you can see by that 0.5 millimeter scale bar, are quite small. They're smaller than the tobacco seed. And can you read it? Yes. Grains that small can be domesticates. Think about teff, the grain, the Ethiopian grain that's used in your pancakes. And it is Eragrostis teff. It's about that size and it is domesticated. These may or may not be domesticated. There's an argument as to whether maybe they're just weeds, they're just seeds of weeds that grow all over and happen to get carbonized. Yeah. Another reason to have a lot of drop seed around, you see it on the right, they're plants that have the leaves aren't very branched and they taper forever, really long, slender leaves. And I have seen them in caves on the shelters on the Edwards Plateau, on the edge of the Edwards Plateau. They're used as the coil element in basketry in those locations. Possibly that's happening in the Panhandle too, where you'd have coiled basketry that's made from drop seed and sewn together with yucca. And as with the corn cobs, I have not seen any more of the basket depicted than is in that picture, but it is a possibility. Purslane that has beautiful edible greens, and that's found on all sites. It's very common on archaeological sites. And this is our only evidence of below ground resources in such a dry environment, which is a real surprise. There's onion bulb fragments across M and at Isaac Windmill. These may be onions, maybe wild onions. There is also, and this shout out to Deb Eller, who pointed out the Indian rush pea there at Paladuro Canyon, and that has an edible tuber. And beautiful yellow flowers, but these are just buds. And I do want to point out the one seed juniper. Of course, it's in the architecture that I will get to before I have to quit. But it's also present as seeds, and I don't want to discount the possibility of culinary use of juniper. Very common, the European species of juniper, very common in Scandinavian cooking, and it's something that would have added a unique flavor to cooking, to dishes, if people chose to use that. I'm a fan, but grapes, they found the wood and the seeds. And mesquite is present at 3 of the 5 sites. At Cross M, it's present as probably part of the roof, architectural elements on the roof, just holding things together up there. Isaac Windmill, it's probably fuel wood. Landegren Mesa is the only one that has the seeds and the endocarps that may reflect debris from processing the pods. So that's the most convincing use of mesquite for food, is just that one site. There are lots of stone mortars. These are from Paladuro Canyon. I assume that there are others in the Panhandle as well. Architectural plants. You can, again, see how beautifully these post molds are preserved. Just amazing. And this is a cross-section of Drover's house from M Cross Ranch. And I'm just going to point out the daub. This is where the roof has fallen in, and this for people who understand things a lot better than I do, this is some of the convincing evidence that these are earth lodges and not thatched, not fundamentally thatched buildings, although there is grass present in the roof layers and so on. That these are earth lodges and not pueblo, not stonework pueblos essentially. So the architectural woods, we've got 4 houses, and basically they're almost all juniper. Certainly the fundamental structural elements, the ones that are holding things up and in contact, the posts that are in contact with the ground, are mostly juniper. There's some roof components that are elm, but the juniper makes sense because it's such a decay-resistant wood. In post-hole tests, tests of fence post conducted by A&M, shout out A&M, juniper is the most durable wood other than bodark, which does not grow in the Panhandle. So here's these beautiful juniper or red cedar. There are at least three species in the Panhandle. I think a lot of this is the one seed juniper, but there's some red cedar out there as well. And scropulorum, which is Rocky Mountain juniper, is also present. I'm not going to spend the next 20 minutes talking about this one ring by ring, but this is my favorite piece of charcoal at any of the sites that I've seen. There's just so much going on. But I'll point out how the vast difference in the sizes in the width of the rings here. This juniper post has seen a lot of different climates and variation in rainfall. There is some decay, and there you go. There's some insect poop, probably termites. So that's enough. Oh, and even from the 14th century, only partially carbonized wood does preserve, which is fairly unusual and tests to the really good preservation environments that these posts were taken from. Here's your cottonwood, and cottonwood growing along the creeks in Palo Duro Canyon. Elm, again, probably a wood of the creeks. I've talked about mesquite already. The structural elements in the above structures, I guess. Oh, the one on the left shows that some of these elements, even though they fell to the ground, were still lashed together when they fell. And on the right, you have some of the daub that has an impression of a wooden support, a wooden stick, and that is a lashing impression, an impression of the lashing material that was used to hold this together. Doug Wilkins contacted me. He had some pictures of those impressions in the archaeological daub. And so what we did was we went and got all the play clay from the HEB and started making impressions of everything we could think of, different diameters of grass, split grass, et cetera, juniper bark, all kinds of things. And the thing that matched was yucca leaves, these long, thin yucca leaves split in half so that every one of them has a green side and a white side, but they're split that direction. So that's our theory, and as far as I know, we're still sticking to it, yucca lashing. There's also a lot of grass. You can see the one that has a node there on the upper left. Phil Deering has said that a lot of this is here it is, Indian grass, Sargastum nutans, that makes those beautiful yellow seed heads that wave in the wind. Another thing of similar diameter is switchgrass, and you can see a little bit in the difference in growth habit that switchgrass is in these clumps, whereas Indian grass, and I think anyway, Indian grass tends to spread out a little bit more like it's a really tall turf grass. And I think this is where I promised fabrics, cordage, and containers, but I don't have a lot of data. Fabrics, leather isn't technically a fabric because it's not constructed, but it is in the fashion industry today, it is counted as a fabric, kind of an honorary fabric. So a lot of what people were wearing is probably leather. And one thing I learned from the Austin Native American Cultural Center Indigenous Fashion Show last week is that, well, first of all, that the fringing on leather garments is to help water drain off, to keep the leather, which I had not known. And yes, and folks here know that because y'all are on the plains, I suppose. And the ribbon work, where you often see these fringes on the ribbon work, that's a reference to those previous leather garments in modern ribbon skirts. So that was a revelation for me. And here's the coiled basket, and that's the end. Us leaving the Palo Duro survey. So comments and questions, please.
Okay. Do you want to start with room or online? Okay. Oh, did you find any medicinal kinds of plants? I mean, I was getting hungry looking at all the.
Oh no, yes, that's a great question, and thank you. It's in the wood charcoal. There is some sagebrush at two of the sites. I bailed on the medicinals, but yeah, I think there's a lot of medicinal use there. Oh, the other possible medicinal is there's a seed that I think is probably yarrow. which is native yarrow. It's a sort of a feathery daisy, member of the daisy family, and it's native all over the world, I think, except Antarctica. And people at the Wildflower Center tell me that our current yarrows are probably a genetic mosaic from all over the planet right now. And so there are yarrow for wound. It's known for wound care. You can also make teas. Make teas out of it, but it's best known for wound care. And then the sagebrush, of course, for more spiritual healing, for smudging and so on. So yeah, thank you.
Is there any raspberries in the Panhandle?
Not that I know of. I should look that up though, because that would be really interesting. I think you have to get more into the mountains for that, but it's beautiful stuff. I take it you've been to the Pueblos.
Well, our son and daughter-in-law live in California, and you just walk in the dogs out through Gillian Land, and there'll be mortars in the stone where they've ground because there's just raspberries all over the place.
Oh, and thanks for the reminder of mortars. Glenna Dean did try for pollen in pollen preservation in those mortars. Almost none, except on the very top layer, where there are a lot of modern pollen. Anybody online?
Online. Why don't we find more mesquite beans?
Because mesquite wasn't real common, is the best I can say, because it's such a great plant for wood and for its wood and for its pods. And I think that we know that it's a Texas native because Kevin Henselka has identified it at Eagle Cave on the Rio Grande, but on the Texas side, 13,000 years ago. So this is a Texas native plant. Phil Deering's identified it from 1,000 years ago at Camp Bowie, so it is headed north, and certainly by 1150, 1400. It's in the Texas Panhandle, but I'm just not seeing a few pieces of wood charcoal, and Glenna found a few beans. So, oh, and I should say in East Texas, I don't see it till the Mission period, so it's not, as far as I know, it's not.
That's it on Zoom for now.
Oh, Alan.
If these folks can raise corn, could they raise watermelons? And could they really not raise beans?
That's a great question, because tepary beans that were developed in northern Mexico are so drought resistant. There's an account of a researcher seeing somebody who in an area of Mexico that gets 3 inches of rain a year. It rained hard, went out and planted tepary beans, got a crop. So yeah, you can grow tepary beans in the Panhandle, but it is parallel to the situation I see in East Texas in that time when people are growing after 1200 in Caddo. People are growing corn, but you don't have the common bean on archaeological sites out there. You have these wild beans. In that case, a few Strophostyles, but it's mostly Vicia ludoviciana, deer pea vetch. Is what they seem to be using, but also the Panhandle folks presumably are consuming a lot of meat, so they may have had less need to balance have the balance of amino acids that allows them to create protein from plant sources because they're getting it from the animals.
Are the wild beans that much more productive?
Oh, than the common bean?
Yeah.
Oh, I think they're probably less productive because they're much smaller fruits. That we're talking pods about this big. So probably eating the whole tender tops and the immature beans is what I'm guessing. So it's not many calories. It's certainly not the calories that you get from the seed beans. So I can see why they switched to the common beans, but I don't know why we don't see beans earlier, especially like the tepary and some of the other beans. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned portulaca or parsley, but you didn't say what they used it for.
Oh, greens. They eat the greens. They're almost like succulents, and they have a little bit of mucilaginous taste that I don't like much, so I don't cook with them much. But they're made verdolagas, a green sauce that you can order in some Mexican restaurants that personally continues to be used today as a green. So, yeah, thank you for that.
I had one more thought.
Yeah.
You mentioned the different shapes in the corns, you know, the tessellate, what do you call it?
Tessellated. Yeah.
Why are they different? Does that make any difference in the way they taste or?
I don't think it does. It makes a difference, I guess, in how you can, whether you want a typewriter or a typewriter if you want to get around.
Some are easier to eat, right?
I'm just gonna, I don't know. It just shows a genetic difference in the corn. And, and as an indigenous corn grower from Tewa told me last summer, the relationships among the plants mirror the relationships among the people, which should be obvious since you're getting your corn from friends and from relatives. So it tells us the patterns of the corn tells us who's friends with whom, who's intermarrying, who's friends, who's relatives. Sorry.
Do they have any bull nettles or anything like that up in that area? Or is that just something we have here?
Yes, bull nettle, specifically the Snidoscolus texanus. It's not, I don't believe it's up there. But yeah, with that big tuber under, yeah. Like I say, I'm just not seeing these tuber plants, and I don't know what's up with that.
My grandmother used to show me how to eat bull nettle seed when they dry.
Okay, do you toast them?
Yeah, she showed me how to eat that. On my place, I have dewberries. This stuff's maybe not as old as this other, or it may be introduced. I have dewberry, poke salad, Texas persimmon, and that's just on a little strip of I only got 8 acres. It's just a little strip of Texas pecan, I think. And it's just one or two things. None of that was mentioned, so it's just a regional.
Yeah, just a regional thing. That sounds like a delicious.
You do have the long onion.
Yes.
And you can tell when you mow.
And there's not many nut trees, and not many trees. That's all I don't to begin with, and not many nut trees.
Nice for balanced diet.
Pardon? I should say that one of the sites had wood from the currant that's native out there and into New Mexico. So there is another fleshy fruit, but it's nothing like that of East Texas, where you just get everything the fruits that hold a lot of water. Out here, you're getting sumac, but not much of that. Yeah. Anybody else? Sorry.
Is the cedar or the juniper, is it considered native to Texas?
Yes. There were some pollen studies early on. We're not finding juniper in the pollen except at the very top of the profiles, and these were in central Texas, unfortunately. And it turns out that what was happening there wasn't that juniper was invading central Texas. It's that the limestone was so is differentially hard on juniper pollen. Even in they went out and Shaw et al. Did some modern studies in kind of juniper forests, these dense juniper stands with a little bit of oak and other things in them, and collecting pollen from the floor. Couldn't find a lot of juniper. It just disappears so rapidly in these environments. So yeah, it is native ash juniper here in central Texas, the red cedar in the East Texas, and then there are lots and lots of junipers worldwide. But yeah, good question, because it is something you hear all of them.
Why so few onions?
That's what I want to know myself, hoping y'all who spend more time in the Panhandle. I don't know. Even on the Palo Duro survey, we saw the Indian rush pea with the edible tuber, and we saw some. They were over and dead, but the brown plant parts were still above ground for the onions, and I just don't know. And there's great preservation in these houses, in these burnt houses on Cross. Anyway, yeah, that's a great question, and I wish I knew why. Yeah. Yeah, they were really good cooks and never burned anything. Yes, I love that.
Right. Yep.
Well, thank you all very much. It's been a great fun.
Well, good presentation. Thank you, Leslie, for coming all the way up from Austin. Super pleasure. One kind of quick announcement. We did get the dates for the Texas Archaeological Society Conference. It will be the first weekend of October. We're gonna put it in the newsletter next month, but 2 to 4 October is the TAS conference. We are working really hard to make those plans. So look into the newsletters and websites about that. I don't know about you guys, but Leslie, you got a voice for podcasting. I'm just gonna say it. You got a good voice. I'd listen to that podcast. So I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight and everyone online who tuned in. We're so glad you're here, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys at our next meeting, which is, remind me the date, second Thursday. I can't remember off the top of my head. April 9th. And Kate will be here, guaranteed. So thanks for coming, guys. Thank you, Leslie. This concludes our March 10 meeting. Bye.
Oh, that's it.